The Madison Metropolitan School District is being sued by one of its own, the district's head of communications. Tim Lamons has hired lawyers to fight the district from releasing documents from an open records request. NBC15 Investigates' Elizabeth Wattis joins us now with details on this case. You'll only learn here on NBC15.
And that's because these documents Lamons is trying to block are about me.
It can be very complex because one of the issues that we face are students not having internet access or technology.
MMSD Communications Director Tim Lamons wanted the public to know about snow days and virtual learning. But there's something else Lamons doesn't want to talk about now.
And please, I'm done with this recording. I don't want to be recorded anymore.
Please don't touch me.
Don't want to be recorded anymore.
3 days ago, he filed a preliminary injunction motion against his employer, MMSD, asking a judge for an expedited review of documents. Documents Lamons doesn't want the public to see. In the court filing, his lawyers say if the information got out, it would lead to, quote, unwarranted, unfair, and irreversible public ridicule and gossip about MMSD's chief spokesperson. Lamons chose to file a lawsuit, which could cost tens of thousands of dollars, instead of having that information in question be made public. We know he's trying to block 2 documents, a cover-page email and a 14-page complaint filled with, quote, personal grievances and accusations against him by several current and former disgruntled MMSD employees. The lawsuit says the complaint was thoroughly investigated by MMSD's Legal and Human Resources departments, including 11 separate interviews and a review of documents and recordings. In December of last year, Lamons' lawyer says the accusations were without merit. The district's legal team has already determined by law they have to release the cover letter and complaint. That's because they were part of an open records request from a local television station. That TV station is WMTV NBC15. And that reporter who submitted the request is me. After having ongoing issues with MMSD and their lack of transparency, I decided to submit an open records request for all staff emails that contained my name and NBC15 within a 1-year time frame. MMSD's legal team did turn over about 100 emails, but apparently not the 2 most important. Dr. Jenkins?
Elizabeth, I think
at MMSD's State of the District address back on January 31st, Lamons blocked me from asking the superintendent questions.
This is a public event. I have every right to try to talk to Dr. Jenkins.
And Dr. Jenkins is speaking to the public.
Okay,
right now.
So we can, we're members
will,
of the public, and we have questions for members of the public.
I understand that.
But will his last-ditch effort lawsuit be enough to block my records and the public's right to know? I reached out to Lamons' lawyers and MMSD for comment. They did not have any at this time. In the studio, Elizabeth Wattis, NBC15 Investigates.